Hello and welcome to this virtual panel session from Foodservice Consulting Society International, FCSI, where we will be discussing the role of technology in the food service sector as it emerges from the pandemic. I'm Tina Nielsen from Progressive Content. I'm the editor of FCSI's Food Service Consulting magazine, and this session is supported by Woodstone. And we will address how technology can help food service operations to diversify and to tackle different challenges such as the staffing crisis that is undergoing at the moment. I'm very happy to be joined by two hugely experienced food service consultants, as well as a chef and sales manager for Woodstone.
Hi, I'm Karen Malody. I'm the owner of Culinary Options in Portland, Oregon. And I have been a consultant for 25 years. Previous to that, in the food industry, total for 40. I focus on both front of house and back of house with regards to customer experience, concept development, and menu development, front of house and back of house. So that's a passion of mine to make sure the two get along.
It's Bill Bender, and I'm based in San Jose, California, and I'm a MAS consultant and the owner of W.H. Bender and Associates. And as you can see by my back panel behind me, I'm also a vice president for SSA Food Service Design and Consulting based in Tampa, Florida. And all my colleagues and friends there, Ken Schwartz, David Hensel, and Howard Stanford are all working in the design area. So I work with them on projects depending on needs and client situations. But primarily I'm in front of house and back of house working with clients for solutions. And, so many times, Tina, we have to find a company that can provide equipment that can cook and do things right. And Woodstone comes up so often as the end solution. So I'm happy to have our, panel sponsored by Woodstone today.
Hi guys, I'm Alex Ricciuti. I'm the chef and regional sales manager for the Eastern U.S. for Woodstone. I've been in food service equipment world for the past 13 years. And prior to that, I was a chef. So I see things kind of from both sides and I can tie things together today. My role with Woodstone is to provide culinary support, but also support our consultants, dealers, and manufacturers, reps.
Okay, all right. So I guess I'd quite like to start with throwing quite a broad question to you about what are the main challenges that you see in the food service sector as we come out of the pandemic.
Oh boy, there are so many. I'll state the obvious one. We need people to staff our operations, and of course that's obvious, and that's very critical. But in addition to that, we see supply chain issues, not only in the food supply chain, but as Alex can probably attest, due to all kinds of dynamics as a result of the pandemic. We have supply chain issues on the equipment side that has slowed down the degree to which you can get new equipment for projects. The cost of everything has accelerated: food, equipment, utilities, leases. A key back of house challenge has been the multiple ordering channels that have come into play as a result of COVID. There's so much pre-order, prepay, pickup, delivery that, again, without coordination in the back of the house, kitchens have just gotten blasted. And a lot of facilities weren't really ready to accommodate all the activities that have to do with the coming and going of pickup and delivery without obstructing the experience of the dine-in customers. So there have been a lot of spatial challenges.
I would concur 100%. Karen really nailed every main point. And, I'm in the great state of California here, Tina. It's in the West Coast of the United States, and we have some regulations in this state. The neat thing about the counties in the state here, they set regulations, and then in 2 or 3 weeks, they change the regulations. So what happens to the operator at a single unit or a multi-unit operation, they start getting set up, say, okay, we can do that. We can do this. We can figure this out. We can train on it. And they get set up and they get supplies in. And then a week later, something changes and they have to go to, ground zero again. So it's very challenging for operators to stay on top of it. And I think the points that Karen made were right on the money. When you have supply chain issues, I mean, can you imagine all of a sudden having to supply masks for hundreds or thousands of employees across a company or a brand? How about a new product being introduced? How do you do that? How do you coordinate your marketing and your operations? And then the big one, like Karen mentioned, was staff members. We have to worry about staff members, team members being engaged and understanding that they have personal problems in their own families and situations. And then we're asking them to come into the hospitality industry and smile on their face. They can't be seen by anybody. So these multiple things play a role in it. And it just creates more of a challenge for operators to face and provide the solutions. And I think one of the things we have to do is really make sure that our staffs and team members are safe and that we do everything we can to ensure their safety, but also make it easy for them to do their jobs. And that's why, menus have been cut back, and that's why menus have been reduced and operating hours have been reduced, obviously. So it's a very complex issue. And, only the fine operators that do well and execute well are going to be able to survive.
Yeah. And, Bill, you throw in issues like electrification versus gas. and real quickly, because I really want to hear Alex's view on this, but I also have to throw in with regards to supply chain issues, with all of the need now to package food for pickup and delivery. Right. That has been no small task to figure out what travels, how to package it. And then what many of my clients are discovering is there's a packaging supply chain issue. So to Bill's point, you just figure out one packaging and then suddenly it's not available anymore because the manufacturers are behind. Yeah. So the packaging implication of food today versus on a plate in a sit-down environment, huge.
Yeah. I mean, and from your point of view, Alex, so you have a probably a slightly different point of view, of a different perspective from where you sit. How do you see the main challenges right now?
Sure. So Karen and Bill did hit it on the head, as Bill said. The issues are labor and supply chain. Yeah. And labor in the sense of not only having less labor, but it'll be less skilled labor and also retaining that labor when you have them. And how do you do that? And the key really is with equipment being simpler, more straightforward. You might be in a situation where you have to train new staff members on a more regular basis. I mean, maybe a monthly basis. How can we make that simpler for the operators so that they can get that consistency? Because as Bill said, I mean, only so many operators, unfortunately, will survive, not to be too negative. But right now, consistency is important for customers. So you want to make that as easy as possible for a not so well-trained operator. You might have a 16-year-old kid, in front of a pizza oven or a grill or what have you. And you want to make that as simple as possible for them to execute to the standards of the brand. When it comes to supply chain, I would say that the key is going to be in the industry to a lot of communication, from consultants to the manufacturers to the dealers, to be very clear about lead times, because we don't want to see a situation where people are not able to open because they can't get their equipment. So I think communication is key.
That's a great point you make, Alex. And I've heard arguments of, well, if equipment is being so smart, are we expecting people to be dumber? Well, no, that's not the point at all. The point really is what you said. I think that, and Bill, you must see it a lot too, in front and back of house. Because of the kind of desperate staffing situation, I find one of the issues is there's no time to train anymore. Mm-hmm. And people, it's like, I have a warm body, I'm going to throw them in a slot where we are desperately need help. And so the training becomes very sabotaged. And the degree to which smart equipment, easily managed, can step in and really help is enormous. It's unfortunate when people feel they can't afford to replace old equipment with some of the newer, because yes, it's costly at first, but it really pays off in the end. I mean, Bill, don't you see that training issue?
Oh, absolutely. The challenges for operators are, will their staff show up if they have staff? And then to get somebody seasoned and comfortable in a position, is a 90-day minimum endeavor. Normally it's 90 days or more to get them even feeling comfortable and not even being a top performer yet. So when you have equipment there, we know that to operate properly, preventive maintenance has to be done on that equipment. Now, that sounds like, that's an easy word, preventive maintenance. How many times do Karen or I or Alex go into a facility and you see an ice machine filter, for example, that hasn't been vacuumed or cleaned or changed out within 5 years, and I go, oh my God, these are the things that are right in front of our faces. And then boom, the things that we know are behind the scenes, you can't even imagine how bad sometimes those things are. But I think that creates opportunities for consultants, right, Karen?
Very much so. Very much so. And equipment manufacturers too, Alex, for sure.
Absolutely.
Right. But I would ask Karen and Bill, over the course of the pandemic and following the pandemic, I found that it's an easier sell for end users to now explain that it's worth making the investment in equipment with the labor challenges we have. So you're going to have fewer people, you're going to have less well-skilled people. Make that investment in the smarter equipment and the more durable equipment. And people are starting to get that a little bit more, I think, than prior to COVID.
I would agree with that. And unfortunately, it comes at a time where minds are open and purse strings are tighter.
Do you think that would be the future, that we will, instead of looking to solve the people problem, we will work on better technology?
I think better technology, but also even in the sense that it makes that end user's life easier. So you're more likely to retain that person. Something that's not complicated or unpleasant to be in front of. It means they're going to stay around longer.
So Karen and Bill, so if we look at those main challenges, people, supply chain, and perhaps also the challenges for the kitchen to deal with all the different new kind of income streams that are, how has that changed how you work as a consultant?
Especially the last year. There were the first 6 months, people were kind of incapacitated and not even operating in most cases. And then when that started to pick up a bit, what I discovered is that a great deal of my consulting fell over into the technology side. And by that, I mean examining POS systems, trying to figure out what POS systems had the most robust features and benefits, to include apps for pre-ordering and prepay, solutions to delivery, solutions for how to package food safely and transport it safely to stay within health code requirements. And then, of course, as Bill mentioned, a lot of menu re-engineering. How do you condense a menu and do it in an intelligent manner so that you're featuring items that can travel well, give you a high contribution margin, and can be managed efficiently and consistently on the line without obstructing your brand image. So it's really been a lot of focus on the implications of technology on the back of house, and then the front of house, the user experience, the customer experience. What does hospitality mean today? Big issue. Well, do we even offer hospitality anymore if there's all this technology? What is hospitality, right?
And we look at the leaders of our units or brands, and what do they spend their time in a 10-hour shift or sometimes a 12-hour or more shift that they're working nowadays because they're pressured into that kind of schedule. So if technology can help us do the administrative tasks, for example, for HR, for onboarding process, for all those type of administrative things, and then you have things like everything's on the cloud now, right? So we have to have devices for team members, for the restaurants, for the operators that are all talking together, communicating together. They're all connected in a connected world with AI. And if we can have those kind of things there, guess what? That leaves the manager an extra 30 minutes to an hour a day to spend time coaching and developing his people. So if we can coach and develop our people, and I know Kate, boom, I take care of her. I work her and to do this, and I can teach her some additional skills. Somebody like Alex as a chef with a client that Woodstone has out in the field can say, I learned a trick about 4 years ago. Let me show it to you. And when you spread that type of knowledge, or what Karen has on, Karen has done so much product development over the years, right, Karen? So
right.
When you look at the things that you can learn and share by coaching one-on-one, like an adored leader wants to, that is really tremendous. So if we can take the monotonous, boring tasks away in a closed office and then get the managers and leaders out with our team members and then close to the guest in the sequence of service and checking on guests and communicating with them and watching all of the COVID-19 related food safety and sanitation and hygiene issues being done and being involved in those processes, that really helps the guest through the guest experience have a lot more confidence, I think, in an operation.
The pandemic has demonstrated, if anything, that there's a real need for diversification in food service, because we can't take it for granted now that we can always have our dining rooms open. But from your point of view, Alex, how have you seen the impact on the kitchens?
Menu streamlining. So focusing more on, your core items that you're known for. And also obviously go back to labor, fewer staff members. But also I would say the customer expectation has become a little bit, everybody's acting a little crazy, right, through COVID, and their expectations are you're getting, upset customers who are upset about things that are unrelated. And so that stress is communicating into, through the front of the line workers and into the kitchen. And so eliminating stress for everybody, I think, should be a focus for all of us.
But in terms of the practical demands on the kitchen.
Yeah, and a lot of brands, I think we all know, are turning to ghost kitchens, or like a hub and spoke approach, where they have a commissary kitchen that's feeding out to other locations. And so that enables them to more efficiently turn out more food. And then they'll have their show kitchen, for example, but then they'll also have, an offsite kitchen, a warehouse or something like that, that's feeding their takeout.
And in addition to that, those who had the space and the ability to quickly renovate and add a second make line in their back of house just for pickup and delivery, because you can't. And again, if you're still committed to on-site accommodation, be it sit down or just even come to the counter and order and leave, but you've got to take care of bodies that are in your space. And if you have to ignore them just to prepare takeout and delivery orders, then a conflict begins to arise. And the customer experience on one hand is not good, but maybe the takeout and delivery speed is wonderful, and they both have to be great. So second make lines were common, ghost kitchens for sure. And again, why it's so important to match back of house technology with front of house increase in ordering is if you don't have a KDS screen where you're tracking all of the orders, when they're coming in, what stage are they in, ready to go, push a button, bump it out, and so that the customer gets a text. But most importantly, you can pull data from the KDS equipment that helps you understand where you're getting into trouble. If your order times are too long, there's some incredible analytics available from from the aspects of POS systems. And I think what many operators are finding is they've got to become business analysts and find the weak spots, fix them, deal with it, change the menu, get a new piece of equipment, whatever the solution is, you've got to identify where the phrase and the rope are.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can't let the customer in the restaurant feel neglected in favor of the takeout orders, because now if somebody has taken the trouble to come to your location, the more seamless that restaurants can make that takeout, the better at this point for the customer experience in-house.
I mean, we were talking about that a little bit earlier with the how the equipment design, it can minimize downtime, can't it, if there's somebody thinking about that properly.
It's a domino effect. So if we solve something from a menu standpoint and the production of an item standpoint, then you have to follow it all the way through. Mm-hmm. Shepherd's pie is a daily special, but how's it cooked? How's it chilled? How's it pre-portioned? How's it heated? And how fast can I get it on a plate looking beautiful or in a box out to the customer? Yeah. And then will it travel in most cases? So there are so many steps to be walked through. And unfortunately, especially as a result of COVID, operators were forced to become, in essence, caterers. with packaging and grab and go and delivery and all that. And that was a pivot that was so dramatic and so fast that many were not able to think through the domino effect and had to go back later and do a lot of fixing because they had to change so quickly.
I suppose a lot of people were just paralyzed because it was such a shock, wasn't it? We'd not experienced anything like it before. So a lot of people would have thought, what do I do now? Can I do this?
Oh, absolutely.
The industry out here was just devastated. I mean, you had a loss of revenue within a week that went from its peak volume to nothing. Mm-hmm. So places closed their doors just to react to it. And then you had all the problems connected with trying to restart in a few months. And then the regulations that we discussed earlier. So when you look at an operator solution, where do you start? It's, you got to have the menu, trim the menu down like Alex discussed. And then you say, I'm a brand. What is my brand, signature items? I have to do a fantastic job with those. Like Karen mentioned, I got to package them right. You can't have something sitting in the container that gets soggy in 3 minutes, right? So all these, the speed of service issues, taking care of your team members, they all get back to the guest experience because we want that guest to say, I'll be back.
And I think we want our employees and our associates to come back too. And Alex, to your point, that internal customer, has needed to be a real shift to taking care of our internal customer. Not that shouldn't always have been a focus, but with so many people leaving the industry to find jobs in other industries that in many cases pay better or the hours are better, we really have to take care of our internal customers or we won't have any employees.
True.
Mm-hmm. Karen, I was in an operation that's close to my home just this last weekend, and I went out with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and Pamela, and we had a meal. A fantastic operation. They've been there for over 20 years. And they had in their patio door the starting wages for all the different positions in the restaurants. But their starting wages for dishwashers, back of house, food prep counter people were over $22 an hour at starting wages. Managers were at shift managers were at $27.50. So, and it's very important that we say this can be a career, and it can be a good career for you if you do your work right.
True. Alex, do you, just to the point of innovation, so obviously the food service sector was largely, in many parts of it, was shut down for a long time, but how do you see innovation during that time? Has innovation actually thrived? Are we seeing now that there's some really good innovation has come out of this very challenging time?
Yes, absolutely. So one thing I've seen is we're all getting a lot more comfortable with QR codes, right? Woodstone included and other manufacturers have utilized that to actually access training, training videos. So to the point where perhaps a new staff member or a manager that's trying to train a new staff member can scan a QR code and access videos of a corporate chef, for example, walking them through that process. So more kind of like training at your fingertips. That's an innovation I've seen. One thing I've called for in the field is actually touchless interactivity via Bluetooth. I think that's a little further out, but actually being able to interact with equipment verbally via Bluetooth. That's something that an operator came up with. Hey, could we do this? It's probably coming.
That is happening for sure, Alex. And I would say customer-facing equipment, quote-unquote self-serve equipment, that is now you download an app, you place your order on your phone, coffee machine, bean to cup. Some of them even now have milk functions, so you can actually place an order and have a drink made in 90 seconds and you've never touched anything as a customer. So those kind of innovations in response to fear and health and safety have been remarkable. And I'm such a fan of equipment manufacturers. I mean, they're out there observing and responding every single day. And we owe so much to our manufacturers. We really do.
One of our best ideas, though, honestly, from the end users. I mean, that came from the end users.
Yes.
And then the question too is, if we go so far, sort of you could say soulless, where you're interacting with almost robotics, does it circle back around to more of an artisanal approach and more of a, just more organic approach, and where people get tired of interacting with, they want to actually see people and see a hearth, for example. So I think there'll be maybe two streams where it gets very futuristic and then perhaps very traditional as well, two different trends possibly.
And I have a feeling a lot of that's going to be time. Who has time for what experience?
About the last 3 months, one of SSA's past clients, Michael Mina, that has multiple operations around the world and particularly the United States, has been posting on their LinkedIn and different social medias team members that have anniversaries or recognition for good performance. So when you look at, that was never done 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, to have on a brand public recognition for great performance. All of a sudden, we're looking at professionals, because we know the food service, restaurant, hospitality industry is always looked down upon in a career sense, right? When are you going to get a real job, Alex? Come on. So, I heard that from the time I was 15 on. But when you look at how Michael Mina is thanking these staff members, posting their picture, giving them recognition like a 1-minute manager should, that is phenomenal. And I was so happy to see that. I had to make some comments on some of the posts going, oh, we're thanking a team member. Isn't that fantastic? I loved it, And I know that's the way Karen works with people in the field that I've seen her working. And Karen and I go back to many years as FCSI consultants. And we've been to a lot of conferences together and a lot of conference calls. And when we recognize team members, thank them, and recognize them for great performance, bing, that's really half the battle, I think, in food service,
Yeah, it's creating a culture, from back to front. So he, Chef Michael Mina took the time to thoughtfully design the workspaces for the people, and then, and to then show them recognition publicly. So sounds like he's doing a great job.
I guess that's innovation of sorts, right? Innovation in how we treat people. I mean, I know that certainly here in the UK, during the pandemic, and I'm sure beyond as well, all of a sudden there was a focus on people who worked in hospitality and in food service as actually essential workers.
Yes, I think there has been a more appreciative approach on the customer side of the equation. I think most of us are so happy to have food service on any level back that it was missed. And yes, the increase in dining at home has had a real impact, all the way from this whole packaging issue to operators trying to figure out how to package and put food together in such a way that when the consumer at home opens it, they're delighted. You know, the packaging is cool. You get a bib, you get a hand wipe. You think through, how do I extend my brand identity and the sense of hospitality to my customer who I may never see? I may never see that customer.
And they're getting the experience at home that they would get in the restaurant, which will hopefully draw them to the restaurant in the future.
Exactly. And that takes a lot of thought. I don't believe I have been inside the four walls of my bank for 10 years.
Yeah.
And yet I have a definite perception of my bank's brand, the customer service, and ironically, it's all based on technology that works most of the time.
Tina, I was just going to mention, on product development and, how hard that challenge is to find new products. And, there's a company out there right now called Blue Evolution that's doing products with seaweed. And when you look at seaweed, how is it used? And I kind of met them a few weeks ago, and I was going, well, let's see, what do you use your products in? And they're going strictly into food service now after trying retail, consumer product goods, CPG. They're going into food service. And when you look at the products that they have, this is a sustainable product. It doesn't require a lot of labor. It comes from the ocean. It's very healthy for you, and it has umami flavor profiles based on 4 different products that they're developing right now and have developed. So if you look at something like that, and technology, innovation, all these things are going to build and create new opportunities, I think, for people like Karen or Alex that are working on products and say, okay, we got chicken, we got pork, we got beef, these same things over and over again. But when you can add some new products to the mix like Blue Evolution is doing, I think it's kind of exciting for flavor profiles that we're all searching for that can help clients or help customers that Alex has at Woodstone to say, hey, have you ever tried this? And it creates some opportunities that way.
Yeah, at the Expo a couple of weeks ago, I had a pizza crust made out of chicken. So that was a new innovation in response to the whole keto trend. So It had 0 carbs.
There is a simultaneous to everything we've talked about, a much greater attention on sustainability of people, the planet, et cetera. So waste stream management, et cetera, but also food supply chain. That is a global issue. Yeah. That we as food service consultants and operators we're very mindful of other forms of nutrition that are available and need to be available. And then that shifts over sometimes into equipment, is what kind of equipment is needed to best produce things that are put on menus. Yeah. It's all so tied together. We must be a team here, all of us.
Speaking of tied together, how closely interlinked is then the importance of new technology?
I think it's pretty balanced, really. There's more and more equipment, like Karen mentioned earlier, smart equipment that is in the back of house and even in the front of house. But the speed of service issues with equipment where machines or beverage dispensers, service things are just speeding up drastically. And then when you look at like what Woodstone has, how easy do you maintain it, clean it? How is it built so it doesn't need maintenance every 3 minutes, right? Right, Alex?
Exactly, yeah.
And is it durable?
Even giving you serve prompts to do preventative maintenance and codes and stuff to get out ahead of service issues, so there's less downtime.
So I think back of house and front of house are really, you're going to have videos and training and apps and all this, smartphones. When we have a smartphone that we all have here, right? And this has got more computer power than the first Apollo, spaceship had in our hands. And we all have them on our hip pocket or purse or whatever we're working with, briefcase. And you say, hey, these things can provide answers. These things can provide solutions. So how these apps are utilized in front of house, training, onboarding, team members, and then boom, how do we get that guest experience or that great food product? I think, Tina, it's endless to how they can be used, right, Karen?
Absolutely, it's the Internet of Things. It's the interaction of all aspects of a food service operation, and collaborative efforts and thinking through, as I alluded to earlier, the entire chain of events that creates efficiency, speed, and a great customer experience. You can't just look at one. You can't, well, you can, and unfortunately many did, open up, the solution is technology. Let's get an app so people can pre-order. Let's put a couple self-ordering kiosks out in the dining room. And before you know it, the kitchen's crashed because there were too many points of order coming into the kitchen without the analytics being done before that in back of house with regards to menu reduction, station loads, and all the things that go into evaluating an intelligent menu. It's all related. You can't increase technology in the front of house and not look at what's needed in the back of house. And I think both Alex and Bill referenced, there's now software that's remarkable to help managers with staffing, scheduling, inventory management, et cetera. That's technology. So I don't want to leave out the importance of allowing certain programs to help managers reduce temperature checks. All of that can be automated now. And to not utilize some of that technology is really a shame, because it's time consuming. And to Bill's point, the more you can free yourself up to truly train, manage, and support, the better off your operation is going to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, when you go into a store now, Tina, at grocery stores in my area down here, the team members are wearing these tags that say their name, the date, and their temperature was okay. So if you think that through the process, like Karen and Alex were saying, through the whole process of team member, guest experience, product innovation, how we take care of our food, how we serve food safely, all these things are connected. There's nothing that isn't connected. No. So I think the one thing that I would look for is how do we eliminate keystrokes? Get these software products to be more intuitive.
Yes.
So we don't have to go ... hitting the device 1,000 times, when really, if we can make them or design, the software manufacturers and equipment people can say, wait a minute, we don't have to put this step in. Let's make it more seamless, more intuitive, to make it easier on our team members to deliver. Because, when you go into some kind of restaurant, sometimes they're having to punch. I watch how many keystrokes they take, and it's in dozens just to have a simple order. Sometimes it's ridiculous.
A lot of opportunity for error too.
True, yeah. So I guess finally, if I could ask you for your thoughts on where this is heading next.
Sure. So I think the decentralization of kitchens is not going anywhere. So the hub and spoke model, the ghost kitchen model, customers rather have become accustomed to having what they want when they want it. Even though we can go out to restaurants now and we can go out to grocery stores and stuff, we've, myself included, we've gotten in the habit of getting things delivered to our doorstep with very little friction. That's not going away. Even when the pandemic is thankfully in the rearview mirror, people have gotten used to that convenience, and so that's not something that operators going to be able to eliminate. So I think for sure, commissary kitchens, ghost kitchens, that'll continue in the foreseeable future.
And you can.
And I think in addition to that, smaller menus. I don't think that most people will back to bloated menus that have more on them than need to be. We cannot be all things to all people. So to me, that means sharpening your brand pillars and your brand promises and staying very focused on your lane. Simplicity. It isn't just about having less on the menu. It's about having a focus to your menu that supports your brand. So I think brand development and stress on that people are really sharpening their image.
Okay. Bill, any final thoughts?
Yeah, one huge thing is cost of real estate, right? So cost of buildings, cost of real estate, size of buildings. I think, it's been mentioned earlier in some FCSI conferences and articles over the last year that, these operations are going to have to be a little smaller now. We're not going to have the gigantic operations that serve hundreds of people. It's going to be a smaller footprint because that space will be affordable. And right now there are just hundreds and thousands of spaces available out there. So people are going to have to refigure and redesign and then re-engineer equipment to go into these spaces. So if somebody wants to reopen a closed operation now, well, look at the cost of energy. Look at these things. How do we put in equipment that uses less energy and has better airflow and has better filtration and has a Halton hood, for example, that knows how to balance everything and works efficiently from an energy standpoint? Those kind of things are huge, I think, from equipment manufacturers. And
I will say another trend that is not going to go away and is only getting bigger, and that is ventless equipment. There were many years and decades where certain situations operators could not serve food. There wasn't ventilation, there wasn't room, it just wasn't right. It's amazing now what you can do with ventless equipment, and that is not going to go away. It will, in fact, related to everything both Bill and Alex have said, as you get smaller spaces, sometimes in odd locations, sometimes ventless is all you can do.
That's correct. Actually, funny, I know these were our final thoughts, but you just made me think of something, Karen. I went on a trip throughout the Northeast visiting consultants, and there was on the subject of going in the direction of very futuristic and maybe back to traditional, the two things I heard the most were ventless and solid fuel cooking, which is couldn't be any more different, right? But
oh boy, that's going to be a battle, the solid fuel versus electrification. That's going to be a hot one. It already is.
Yeah.
Well, that is an excellent point to close on. So Karen, Alex, Bill, thank you so much for joining me for this session. And I'd also like to say thanks to Woodstone for supporting the session and this discussion. It's been really interesting. So thanks for sharing your insights.